Hello guys and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be going over for loops. Now for loops are very much like while loops, and forgot to mention in the last video, make sure to play around with the code. It's always good to play around with the code. Playing around with the code I've given you and that you've written and altering it yourself to see what outcomes you might get is even more important than following the tutorial. In fact, if I were asked advice on what to do, whether you should follow the tutorial, just follow the tutorial, or play around with some pre-existing code and alter, I'd say play around and alter some pre-existing code just to make sure you understand what you're actually coding, see what outcomes it gets, and yeah, just really fully understanding the code and how to use it and how to use it and alter it and manipulate it in different scenarios. Alright, back to the video. So, for loops are kind of like while loops. They also have conditions that need to be met. However, for loops are almost always used in an array, but we'll get to that in a second. So let's create our first for loop. So we just type in for int I equals to 0. I'll explain all of this in a second. I is smaller than 10. Or we can say I does not equal to 10. No, let's just say smaller than 10. And I plus plus, and then we can print out I, or current iteration space, and then we can put I. So let's run the code at first and let's see what gets printed out. You can see it says current iteration 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So essentially this is looping 10 times, right, starting at 0, and it's printing this out 10 times, and variable I is being incremented upon, or, it's being added 1 every time, and that is done through this for loop. Now, what exactly does this do? Well, it's saying for integer I, and of course integer I is going to be equal to 0 in the beginning, while that variable we just created, while variable I, which is at first is equal to 0, while I is smaller than 10, we are just going to add 1 to integer I, while also running this right here, running any code within the for loop. And so that's what this 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 comes out to, because you're printing out the value of I, and then it adds 1, so it goes from 0 to 1 or 1 to 2, and then we're printing out it again, so if it was at 0, then it would go to 1. And that's all for loops are used for. Or sorry, that's how for loops work. Now, I said they are used in arrays, and they are, so if we just do int, an array of ints, and we can just call this numbers, and then we can say it's equal to new integer array. That array has 5 slots. We can just say int slots 0 equals to, whoops, sorry, I keep typing that out, numbers slots 0 equals to 4, or yeah, let's say 2, and then numbers slot 1 is equal to 4. We can just go every other number, so numbers, so every even number, slot 2 is equal to 6, and so on and so forth. Slot 3 is equal to 8. Just copy this down, which I should have done in the first place, 10, and this is slot 4. So now we can say, in this for loop, let's redo this for loop, we can say for integer I, and instead of doing is smaller than 10, let's say we just want to do it for every single index we have in this array, we can just say numbers, the dot length, which is the length of the array. So for every index we're going to print out I, but instead of I, let's just say we're going to print out numbers, right? Or sorry, not numbers, numbers and the iteration. Alright, so let's run this, and you can see You know what? No, it should not say current iteration. It should say index value. So let's run this, and it'll say index value 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Now why is this? Well, it's saying for integer I, which equals to 0, as long as I is smaller than the array's length, then we're going to add 1 to I, and we're also going to print out we're going to print out the array list index of I. So whichever iteration we're on, and the first iteration, in which I would be equal to 0, we set to 0, index 0 to 2, so it's going to print out 2. Then index 1 is set to 4, so when it's on iteration 1, it's going to print out to 4, etc., so on and so forth, until it reaches the length, the maximum number of indexes inside of this array. And that is all for this tutorial. If you have any questions, once again, please leave a question in the comment section below, and always make sure to play with the code that I've given you and alter and see what outcomes you might get. See you in the next video. Goodbye.